The thundering hooves pounded across the dry Montana plains as Daisy Sutherland clutched desperately to her satchel. The stagecoach, wheels kicking up dust that clouded her vision and choked her lungs. It was 1878, and everything she owned was in that bag, everything she had left after fleeing the judgment and cruel whispers of Boston society. When the stagecoach finally rolled into Silver Creek, Daisy was the last passenger remaining. The small frontier town was nothing like the bustling city she'd left behind. A single dirt road lined with wooden buildings, a saloon with swinging doors, a general store, and what appeared to be a newly constructed schoolhouse. This would be her fresh start if the town would have her. "Last stop, madam," the driver called down. He didn't offer his hand as he had for the other female passengers who disembarked at previous stops. Daisy smoothed her travel-worn dress, a navy blue that had once been fashionable in Boston circles, but now seemed ridiculous against the backdrop of the rugged frontier town. She gathered her courage and attempted to step down from the coach, her ankle-length skirt catching on a loose nail. With an ungraceful lurch, she tumbled forward, landing hard in the dirt. Laughter erupted from the saloon porch, where several men had been watching the stagecoach arrival. Daisy's cheeks burned as she scrambled to collect her dropped belongings, her generous figure making the effort more difficult than it would have been for the willowy women who were celebrated back east. "Need a hand, miss?" A deep voice cut through the laughter. Daisy looked up to see a tall man extending his hand. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out a strong jaw dusted with stubble and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wore simple clothing-worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest that had seen better days. A gun belt hung low on his hips, the pistol well used but meticulously maintained. "Thank you, but I can manage," she replied, attempting to maintain what little dignity she had left. As she tried to stand, her ankle gave way and she stumbled again. The man caught her arm. "Seems like you could use that hand after all." Reluctantly, Daisy accepted his help, noticing the rough calluses on his palm as it enveloped her smaller hand. He pulled her to her feet with an ease that suggested he was accustomed to physical labor. "Name's August Yates," he said, releasing her hand and bending to retrieve her satchel. "Folks around here call me Gus." "Daisy Sutherland," she replied, brushing the dust from her skirt. "I'm the new schoolteacher." Gus's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're the teacher. Town's been waiting on you for near 2 weeks. Daisy felt a fresh wave of embarrassment. The stagecoach was delayed in Cheyenne. There was trouble with "No need to explain," Gus interrupted. "Town council will be glad you're here, regardless. School's been sitting empty since it was built." He gestured toward the small wooden building at the end of the street. "That's the schoolhouse there. Teachers' quarters are attached to the back." He paused, looking her over with an appraising gaze that wasn't unkind but made Daisy uncomfortable nonetheless. "Might be smaller than what you're used to." Daisy lifted her chin. "I'm sure it will be perfectly adequate." Gus nodded, then gestured to her bag. "I can carry that for you if you'd like." Before she could respond, a boisterous voice called out from the direction of the saloon. "Hey, Gus, you gonna need a wagon to haul that one around." A red-faced man leaned against the saloon's porch railing, his laughter echoing in the quiet street. "Looks like the eastern cities are sending us their leftovers." Daisy froze, the familiar sting of such comments piercing through her. She'd heard variations of the same cruel jests all her life in finishing school, at social gatherings, even from her own family. It was part of why she'd answered the advertisement for a teacher in the Montana Territory, hoping to escape the judgment of Boston society. "Ignore him," Gus said quietly. Frank Thompson spends more time with whiskey than good sense. But Daisy could already feel tears threatening. She blinked rapidly, determined not to cry in front of these strangers. If you could just direct me to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, I'll be on my way. Mrs. Holloway's. Gus's brow furrowed. She closed up shop last month. Her son came from Denver and took her back east. Daisy's heart sank. But where am I to stay? The town council arranged. They probably didn't get word in time to send you a telegram, Gus said. He seemed to consider something for a moment. There's a room above the general store that Mrs. Perkins rents sometimes. I can take you there. Another call came from the saloon. Better reinforce the floorboards, Perkins. Daisy's resolve crumbled. Tears spilled down her cheeks despite her best efforts. I should never have come here, she whispered. Gus's expression hardened as he turned toward the saloon. That's enough, Thompson. He called, his voice carrying a clear warning. Then he turned back to Daisy, his voice softening. Don't mind them. They're just not used to seeing a refined lady like yourself. Refined? Daisy gave a bitter laugh through her tears. They called me too heavy, she wept, the words escaping before she could stop them. Gus studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes unexpectedly gentle. Then, with a quiet intensity that made her breath catch, he said, Then you're heavy enough to anchor my soul. Daisy stared at him, certain she'd misheard. No one had ever spoken to her with such sincerity, especially not about her figure. Men in Boston had either ignored her entirely or made her the target of their cruel jokes. I don't need your pity, she said, wiping at her tears. Not offering pity, Miss Sutherland, Gus replied, his expression serious. Just stating a fact. Now let me help you get settled. Silver Creek needs a teacher, and you look like you've come a long way. He picked up her satchel and offered his arm, ignoring the continued jeers from the saloon. After a moment's hesitation, Daisy placed her hand on his forearm, feeling the solid muscle beneath the worn fabric of his sleeve. As they walked down the dusty street, Daisy became acutely aware of the stares from the townspeople. Some were curious, others dismissive, a few outright hostile. She'd hoped that the frontier would be different from Boston society, that people would be judged by their abilities rather than their appearances. But it seemed that human nature was the same everywhere. Here we are, Gus said as they approached a two-story building with a sign reading Perkins General Merchandise. He led her inside, where shelves were stocked with everything from canned goods to tools to bolts of fabric. A thin woman with graying hair looked up from behind the counter. August Yates, twice in one day, must be my lucky day. Her eyes shifted to Daisy. And who might this be, Mrs. Perkins? This is Miss Daisy Sutherland, our new schoolteacher, Gus said. The stagecoach just brought her in and she needs a place to stay. I told her you sometimes rent your upstairs room. Mrs. Perkins's gaze swept over Daisy, lingering on her dusty, rumpled dress and tear-stained face. I do rent it occasionally, but it's quite small. Not sure it would be comfortable. Daisy felt her cheeks flush again. The woman's meaning was clear. The room wouldn't accommodate someone of Daisy's size. I'm sure it will be fine, Daisy said stiffly. I don't require much space. Mrs. Perkins hesitated. It's $3 a week, meals included, but I expect my boarders to help with chores. I'm willing to work, Daisy assured her. Well then, Mrs. Perkins said, seemingly satisfied, let me show you upstairs. As the older woman moved toward the back staircase, Gus placed Daisy's satchel on the counter. Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Yates, Daisy said formally, extending her hand. Gus took it, but instead of shaking it, he held it gently for a moment. School board meets tomorrow evening at the town hall, 7 o'clock. I'm sure they'll want to meet you. I'll be there, Daisy promised. And Miss Sutherland, he added, releasing her hand, don't let the likes of Frank Thompson get under your skin. Most folks around here are decent enough once you get to know them." With that, he tipped his hat and walked out, leaving Daisy to follow Mrs. Perkins up the narrow staircase. The room was indeed small, barely large enough for a single bed, a washstand, and a trunk at the foot of the bed. A tiny window looked out over the main street, letting in the late afternoon sunlight. "It's not much," Mrs. Perkins said, "but it's clean. Bathroom's down the hall. You'll share it with my son when he's in town. He drives freight between here and Helena." "It's perfect," Daisy said, though it was far from it. Still, it would do until she could move into the teacher's quarters behind the schoolhouse. Mrs. Perkins nodded. "Supper's at 6. Don't be late. I don't serve cold food." Once alone, Daisy sank onto the bed, which creaked ominously under her weight. She buried her face in her hands and allowed herself a moment of doubt. Perhaps coming to Silver Creek had been a mistake. Perhaps she should have stayed in Boston, enduring the familiar slights rather than facing new ones. Then she remembered August Yates's words, "Heavy enough to anchor my soul." Had he truly meant it, or was it just a kind lie to make her feel better? Daisy took a deep breath and straightened her spine. She hadn't come all this way to give up at the first sign of trouble. Tomorrow she would meet the school board, and she would prove to them, to the entire town, that she was more than her appearance. She unpacked her few belongings, changed into her cleanest dress, and washed her face in the basin. By the time she went downstairs for supper, she had composed herself into the picture of a proper schoolteacher, serene, dignified, and determined. What she didn't expect was to find August Yates sitting at Mrs. Perkins's dining table. "Mr. Yates," she said, surprised. He stood as she entered, a gesture of politeness she hadn't expected in this frontier town. "Miss Sutherland, Mrs. Perkins invited me for supper. Hope you don't mind." "Of course not," Daisy replied, though her heart had begun to beat faster. "It's Mrs. Perkins's table after all." Mrs. Perkins bustled in from the kitchen, carrying a large pot of stew. "Sit down, both of you. August always comes for supper on Tuesdays. Best customer I've got, eats enough for 3 men. Daisy took a seat across from Gus, acutely aware of his presence. Up close, without the shadow of his hat, she could see that his eyes were indeed gray, with flecks of blue around the pupils. A small scar crossed his left eyebrow, and his dark blonde hair was in need of a trim, curling slightly at the nape of his neck. "So, Miss Sutherland," Mrs. Perkins said as she ladled stew into bowls, "what brings a Boston lady like yourself all the way to Silver Creek?" Daisy accepted her bowl with thanks. "I saw an advertisement for a teacher, and I've always wanted to see the West. Long way to come just to see some mountains and dust," Mrs. Perkins remarked. "I also wanted a fresh start," Daisy admitted. "Sometimes a change of scenery is good for the soul." "Running from something?" Mrs. Perkins asked bluntly. "Mother," Gus said, his tone warning. Daisy nearly dropped her spoon. "Mother," Mrs. Perkins chuckled. "Did he not mention it? August is my son. My first husband was named Perkins. August's father was my second, God rest his soul." Daisy looked between them, seeing the resemblance now in the shape of their eyes and the set of their jaws. "No, he didn't mention it." Gus shrugged, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Didn't come up." "August owns the largest cattle ranch in the county," Mrs. Perkins continued proudly. "The Double Y, 20 miles west of town. He comes in once a week for supplies and to check on his old mother." "A rancher," Daisy said, reassessing him. She'd assumed he was a cowhand or perhaps the town marshal, given the way he'd confronted the men at the saloon. "Among other things," Gus replied. "I also serve on the school board, which is why I was in town today. We were discussing whether to postpone the start of school since you hadn't arrived yet." "I'm sorry for the delay," Daisy said. As I mentioned, there was trouble in Cheyenne. Indian trouble, Mrs. Perkins asked, eyes wide. No, nothing like that, Daisy assured her. A wheel broke on the stagecoach, and we had to wait for repairs. The conversation continued through supper, with Mrs. Perkins doing most of the talking. She filled Daisy in on the town's history and its inhabitants, including which families had children who would be attending the school. There's about 20 children of school age in and around Silver Creek, she explained. Some will ride in from outlying ranches and farms. The Yates children will be among them. Yates children? Daisy looked at Gus in surprise. My brother's children, he clarified. Daniel and his wife live at the ranch with me. They have 4 little ones. Oh, Daisy said, feeling an unexpected sense of relief. I look forward to meeting them. After supper, Gus excused himself, saying he needed to check on his horse before the ride back to the ranch. Daisy helped Mrs. Perkins clear the table and wash the dishes, grateful for the simple task that kept her hands busy while her mind whirled with the day's events. Later, as she prepared for bed, a soft knock sounded at her door. Daisy wrapped a shawl around her shoulders before opening it to find Gus standing in the hallway, hat in hand. I wanted to say good night before I headed back to the ranch, he said, and to give you this. He held out a small leather-bound book. Daisy accepted it curiously. What is it? A history of Silver Creek and the surrounding area. Thought it might help you get your bearings. There's a map inside that shows where all the ranches and farms are located. Thank you, Daisy said, touched by his thoughtfulness. This will be very helpful. Gus nodded, settling his hat back on his head. I'll see you at the school board meeting tomorrow, 7 o'clock. I'll be there, Daisy promised. He turned to go, then paused. What I said earlier, by the stagecoach, I meant it. Before Daisy could respond, he was gone, his boots making little sound on the wooden stairs. Daisy closed her door and leaned against it, clutching the book to her chest. For the first time since arriving in Silver Creek, she felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this place could be her fresh start after all. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Daisy rose early, determined to visit the schoolhouse and assess what supplies she would need before classes began. After a quick breakfast with Mrs. Perkins, she set out down the main street, the book Gus had given her tucked safely in her ridicule. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building with large windows to let in natural light. A bell hung in a small tower above the entrance, and a freshly painted sign read Silver Creek School. Daisy used the key Mrs. Perkins had given her to unlock the door and stepped inside. The room was clean and well built, with rows of desks facing a larger desk and blackboard at the front. Bookshelves lined one wall, though they were mostly empty. A pot-bellied stove stood in the center of the room for heating during the winter months. A door at the back of the classroom led to the teachers' quarters, a snug 2-room apartment with a small kitchen, a bedroom, and a private bathroom. It was simple but far more spacious than Mrs. Perkins's rented room. Daisy spent the morning making lists of books and supplies she would need, planning lessons and organizing the space. Around noon, a knock at the schoolhouse door interrupted her work. A woman stood there, a basket over her arm and 2 young children peering around her skirts. She was slender and pretty, with blonde hair tucked neatly under a bonnet. "Hello," she said with a warm smile. "You must be Miss Sutherland. I'm Emily Yates, Daniel's wife, August's sister-in-law. We heard you'd arrived, and I thought you might appreciate some lunch." "That's very kind of you," Daisy said, surprised and pleased by the gesture. Emily ushered her children inside. "This is James. He's 7, and Sarah, who's 5. They'll be in your school this year." The children greeted Daisy politely, though Sarah hid partially behind her mother. "It's lovely to meet you both," Daisy said, smiling at the children. I'm looking forward to having you in my class." Emily set the basket on one of the desks and began unpacking it. "I brought fried chicken, biscuits, and some apple pie. Gus mentioned you'd had a rough welcome yesterday, and I wanted to make sure you knew that not everyone in Silver Creek is like Frank Thompson." "Thank you," Daisy said, touched by the kindness. "Mr. Yates August was very helpful yesterday." Emily's eyes twinkled. "He spoke quite highly of you at breakfast this morning, said you seemed like a woman of substance, high praise from my brother-in-law." Daisy felt her cheeks warm. "He barely knows me." "Gus has always been a good judge of character," Emily replied. "He doesn't say much, but when he does, it's worth listening to." They shared the lunch, with Emily filling Daisy in on more details about the town and its inhabitants. The children warmed up to Daisy quickly, especially when she showed them some of the books she planned to use in her teaching. "Will you teach us about Indians?" James asked eagerly. "James," Emily admonished, "mind your manners." "It's all right," Daisy assured her. "Yes, James, we'll learn about the native peoples of this region. In fact, I'm hoping to learn more about them myself." "Uncle Gus knows a lot about them," Sarah piped up. "He speaks their language and everything." Daisy raised her eyebrows. "Does he?" Emily nodded. "August spent some time living with the Crow when he was younger. He's respected by them, which has helped keep the peace in these parts. He still visits their camps occasionally to trade." This new information added another layer to Daisy's growing impression of August Yates. He was clearly not the simple rancher she had initially assumed. After lunch, Emily and the children took their leave, but not before inviting Daisy to Sunday dinner at the ranch. "Daniel will bring the wagon to town after church," Emily said. "We'd love to have you join us." "I'd be delighted," Daisy replied sincerely. The rest of the day passed quickly, as Daisy continued her preparations for the start of school. By the time she needed to leave for the school board meeting, she had a comprehensive plan for her first week of teaching and a detailed list of supplies she would need. The town hall was a larger building next to the sheriff's office. When Daisy entered, 5 people were already seated at a long table. The mayor, a portly man named Harold Jenkins, the town doctor, William Carson, a stern-looking woman introduced as Mrs. Alina Whitman, wife of the bank manager, a bearded man who owned the livery stable, Thomas Cooper, and August Yates, who nodded in greeting as she entered. Mayor Jenkins stood to welcome her. "Miss Sutherland, we're pleased you've finally arrived. We were beginning to worry something had happened to you." "The stagecoach was delayed in Cheyenne," Daisy explained again. "I apologize for any inconvenience." No matter," the mayor said, gesturing for her to take a seat. "You're here now, and that's what counts. We're eager to get our school up and running." For the next hour, Daisy presented her teaching plans and discussed the supplies she would need. The board members asked questions about her qualifications and experience, which she answered confidently. Throughout the discussion, she was aware of Gus watching her, his expression thoughtful. "Well, I think we can all agree that Miss Sutherland is exactly what our town needs," Mayor Jenkins said finally. "Unless anyone has objections, I move that we officially hire her as the Silver Creek schoolteacher at a salary of $40 per month, with an additional allowance for school supplies." "I second the motion," Dr. Carson said promptly. "All in favor?" the mayor asked. All 5 board members raised their hands. "Excellent. Miss Sutherland, welcome to Silver Creek. School will begin next Monday, which should give you time to settle in and prepare." "Thank you," Daisy said, relief washing over her. "I won't let you down." As the meeting broke up, Gus approached her. "I can help you move your things to the teachers' quarters tomorrow if you'd like." "That would be very kind," Daisy said, "though I don't have much to move." I also thought you might want to visit the general store to order those supplies you mentioned," he continued. "I'm heading there now to pick up a few things for the ranch." They walked together down the darkening street, the setting sun painting the buildings in shades of gold and amber. The air was cooling rapidly, a reminder of the approaching autumn. "Your sister-in-law visited me today," Daisy mentioned. "She brought lunch and introduced me to two of your nieces and nephews." Gus smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "Emily's good that way. Always thinking of others. She invited me to Sunday dinner at your ranch." "Good," Gus said. "You'll get to meet the rest of the family." At the general store, Daisy placed orders for the school supplies, and Gus arranged for them to be delivered to the schoolhouse. He also added several items to his own order, including coffee, flour, and ammunition. As they walked back toward Mrs. Perkins's boarding house, Daisy gathered her courage. "Mr. Yates, August," he corrected. "Or Gus. We don't stand much on formality out here." "August," Daisy repeated, the name feeling intimate on her tongue. "Your sister-in-law mentioned that you spent time living with the Crow people." He nodded. "After my father died, I was a bit lost. Ended up spending nearly 2 years with them, learned their ways, their language. It changed how I see the world." "In what way?" Daisy asked, genuinely curious. Gus considered the question. "They value different things than white society does. Physical strength matters, yes, but so does wisdom, generosity, and harmony with the natural world." He glanced at her. "And they have different ideas about beauty, too." Daisy felt her cheeks warm again. "Is that so? Among the Crow, a woman with substance is considered beautiful," he said carefully. "It shows that she's well cared for, that she'll bear strong children, that she can survive hard times." They had reached Mrs. Perkins's doorstep, and Daisy paused, unsure how to respond. "That's interesting. I'm not saying it well," Gus said, frustration evident in his voice. "What I mean is the door opened suddenly, revealing Mrs. Perkins. There you are. I was beginning to worry. Come in, both of you, before you catch your death in this evening chill." The moment broken, Daisy followed Mrs. Perkins inside with Gus trailing behind. Whatever he had been about to say remained unspoken. The following days passed in a whirlwind of activity as Daisy prepared for the start of school. True to his word, Gus helped her move her few belongings to the teacher's quarters, and he also brought a wagon load of firewood for the schoolhouse stove. "Winter comes early in these mountains," he explained as he stacked the wood neatly behind the building. "You'll want to keep this stove going once the cold sets in." Daisy watched him work, admiring the easy strength with which he handled the heavy logs. Though not overtly muscular like some of the cowboys she'd seen around town, there was a lean power to him that spoke of a lifetime of physical labor. "How large is your ranch?" she asked, partly out of genuine curiosity and partly to distract herself from her increasingly inappropriate thoughts. "About 5,000 acres, Gus replied, setting another log on the growing stack. "Not as big as some, but it's good land with plenty of water. We run about 800 head of cattle." "That sounds enormous to me," Daisy admitted. "I've never been outside a city before coming west." Gus straightened, brushing wood chips from his hands. "It must be quite a change for you." "It is," Daisy agreed, "but a welcome one. Boston was confining in many ways." "And Silver Creek isn't?" Gus asked, his gray eyes studying her. Daisy considered the question. "It's different here." "Yes, there are people like Frank Thompson, but there are also people like your family who have made me feel welcome. And there's a sense of possibility here that I never felt in Boston." Gus nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. "The West has a way of stripping away pretenses. Out here, what matters is whether you can pull your own weight, not what you look like doing it." Sunday arrived clear and crisp, with a hint of autumn in the air. Daisy wore her best dress to church, a deep green wool that complemented her auburn hair and fair complexion. The small church was filled to capacity, with families from town and the surrounding ranches and farms gathered for the weekly service. Daisy sat with Mrs. Perkins, aware of the curious glances directed her way. After the service, many people introduced themselves, including parents of her future students. Some were welcoming, others reserved, but none were openly hostile. She spotted Gus standing with a man who looked remarkably like him, though slightly shorter and with a fuller beard. This must be Daniel, she thought, and her guess was confirmed when Emily waved her over to join them. "Miss Sutherland, this is my husband, Daniel," Emily said. "And these are our other 2 children, Thomas, who's 10, and little Rebecca, who's 3. Daniel Yates shook her hand firmly. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Sutherland. Emily and the children have talked of nothing else since meeting you." "All good things, I hope," Daisy replied with a smile. "The best," Daniel assured her. "Now shall we head to the ranch for dinner? The wagon's just outside." The journey to the Double Y Ranch took about an hour, during which Daisy sat between Emily and the children in the back of the wagon while Daniel and Gus rode on horseback alongside. The landscape opened up as they left town, revealing rolling hills covered in golden grass that swayed in the breeze. "It's beautiful," Daisy breathed, taking in the vista of mountains in the distance. "Wait until you see the ranch," Emily said proudly. "It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen." She was right. The Double Y was nestled in a valley with a clear stream running through it. The main house was a substantial 2-story structure built of logs and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Several outbuildings, a barn, bunkhouse, smokehouse, and others formed a loose cluster nearby. Corrals held horses and cattle, and beyond them, the ranch land stretched as far as Daisy could see. "Welcome to the Double Y," Daniel said as he helped them down from the wagon. Inside, the house was surprisingly elegant, with polished wooden floors, comfortable furniture, and colorful rugs. Bookshelves lined the walls of the main room, filled with volumes that made Daisy's heart leap with excitement. "August built most of the furniture himself," Emily explained, noticing Daisy's admiration of a particularly beautiful dining table. "He has a way with wood." Dinner was a lively affair, with the children eager to share their thoughts and ask questions. Daisy found herself relaxing in the warm family atmosphere, laughing more than she had in years. After the meal, Emily suggested that Gus show Daisy the rest of the ranch while she and Daniel cleaned up. "I'd like that," Daisy said, surprising herself with her eagerness. Gus led her outside and helped her onto a gentle mare while he mounted a sturdy bay gelding. They rode at a leisurely pace, with Gus pointing out features of the ranch: the spring-fed pond where they watered cattle in summer, the high meadow where wildflowers bloomed in spring, the grove of aspens that turned golden in autumn. "You've built something remarkable here," Daisy said as they paused on a ridge overlooking the valley. "My father started it," Gus replied. "Daniel and I built on what he began. It's good land if you're willing to work it properly." "And are you?" Daisy asked. "Willing to work it properly, I mean." Gus turned to her, his expression serious. "I believe in taking only what you need and giving back when you can. The land provides for us, but only if we respect it." "Is that something you learned from the crow?" Daisy asked. "Partly," Gus admitted. "Though my father taught us similar values. He wasn't like many of the early settlers. He believed in living alongside the native peoples, not driving them out." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of leather and the soft footfalls of their horses. "May I ask you something personal?" Gus said eventually. "You may ask," Daisy replied cautiously. Though I reserve the right not to answer. Gus smiled slightly. Fair enough. What really brought you all the way from Boston to Silver Creek? And don't say it was just for a change of scenery. Daisy looked out over the landscape, considering her response. Part of her wanted to give the same vague answer she'd given others, but something about August Yates made her want to be honest. I was engaged, she said finally, to a man from a prominent Boston family. It was arranged by our parents, a business merger as much as a marriage. You didn't love him, Gus guessed. No, Daisy agreed. Though I might have grown to in time, but She swallowed hard. He found me lacking. Specifically, he found my figure distasteful. He made it clear that while he would honor the engagement for business reasons, he would seek his pleasures elsewhere. Gus's expression darkened. He told you this? After several glasses of brandy at a dinner party, Daisy confirmed. He didn't realize I was within earshot when he was boasting to his friends about the sacrifices he was making for his family's business interests. What did you do? Gus asked. I broke the engagement the next day, Daisy said, which caused quite the scandal. My family was furious. They stood to gain considerably from the match. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Montana Territory, it seemed like providence. Gus was quiet for a long moment. The man was a fool, he said finally, his voice low and intense. And blind. Daisy gave a small, bitter laugh. You don't need to say that. I know what I look like. Do you? Gus challenged. He reined his horse closer to hers. Because from where I'm sitting, what I see is a woman of intelligence, courage, and beauty. Beauty, Daisy repeated incredulously. Yes, beauty, Gus insisted. Your eyes change color with your mood. Sometimes they're green, sometimes blue, sometimes a mix of both. Your smile lights up your whole face. And your figure. He paused, color rising in his cheeks. Your figure is exactly as a woman's should be. Daisy stared at him, searching for any sign of mockery or pity. She found none, only earnest admiration that made her heart race. I think we should head back, she said finally, uncertain how to respond to such direct praise. Gus nodded, respecting her obvious discomfort. They rode back to the main house in silence, though it wasn't unpleasant, just thoughtful. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly, with more conversation and laughter. By the time Daniel was ready to take Daisy back to town, she felt as though she'd known the Yates family for years rather than days. As they prepared to leave, Gus approached her with a small wooden box in his hands. A welcome gift, he said, offering it to her. For your classroom. Daisy opened the box to find a beautifully carved set of alphabet blocks, each letter intricately detailed with images that corresponded to it, with an apple, B with a bear, and so on. Did you make these? She asked, running her fingers over the smooth wood. Gus nodded. I started them when we heard a teacher was coming, finished them last night. They're beautiful, Daisy said, genuinely moved by the gift. Thank you. You're welcome, Gus replied. Then more quietly, I meant what I said earlier, all of it. Before Daisy could respond, Daniel called that the wagon was ready. With a final thank you to Emily for the lovely day, Daisy climbed aboard for the journey back to town. The first day of school arrived with perfect autumn weather. Daisy stood at the door of the schoolhouse, greeting each student as they arrived. By 9 o'clock, 22 children ranging in age from 5 to 16 were seated at the desks, their faces a mix of curiosity, excitement, and in some cases, wariness. Good morning, Daisy said, moving to stand behind her desk. I'm Miss Sutherland, and I'm honored to be your teacher. We have much to learn together, but first, I'd like to learn about you. She had each child stand and introduce themselves, sharing a bit about their families and their interests. The Yates children were confident and articulate, clearly well educated already. Others were more hesitant, particularly those from the more remote homesteads who had had little formal education. After the introductions, Daisy divided the children into groups based on their ages and current knowledge, assigning appropriate lessons to each. The morning passed quickly, and by the time the noon break arrived, Daisy felt a deep satisfaction. This was what she had been born to do, to teach, to encourage, to watch young minds blossom. The first week of school established a comfortable routine. Daisy rose early each morning to prepare her lessons, taught until mid-afternoon, and spent her evenings grading papers and reading. On Wednesday, Gus stopped by the schoolhouse after classes ended, bringing a load of books from his personal library for the school's shelves. "These were just gathering dust at the ranch," he said as he carried in a crate of volumes. "Thought they might be more useful here." Daisy examined the books with delight: history, literature, science, even some volumes in French and Spanish. "These are wonderful, August. Are you sure you want to part with them?" "I'm not parting with them," he replied with a small smile, "just sharing them. Besides, this gives me an excuse to visit." "Do you need an excuse?" Daisy asked before she could stop herself. Gus's smile widened. "I was hoping I wouldn't." That evening he stayed to help her shelve the books, and afterward they sat on the schoolhouse steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. "I've been thinking about what you told me," Gus said after a comfortable silence. "About your ex-fiancé." Daisy tensed slightly. "What about him?" "I keep thinking about how fortunate I am that he was such a fool," Gus said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "If he'd had any sense at all, you'd be married to him now, living in Boston, and I'd never have met you." Daisy's breath caught. "August, I know it's too soon," he continued. "You've only been here 2 weeks, but I want you to know that I'm interested in courting you, Daisy, properly, if you're amenable." Daisy stared at him, her heart pounding. "Why?" she asked, the question escaping before she could reconsider it. Gus turned to face her, his expression serious. "Because in the short time I've known you, I've seen your kindness with the children, your intelligence, your courage in coming all this way alone. Because you make me laugh, and because when I'm with you I feel settled. Like I've found something I didn't know I was missing. And it has nothing to do with pity," Daisy pressed, "or some noble desire to rescue the woman others mocked. No," Gus said firmly. "It has to do with admiration, respect, and yes, attraction." His cheeks colored slightly at the last word. "Considerable attraction." Daisy looked down at her hands, trying to process his words. Part of her wanted to believe him, wanted desperately to believe that this thoughtful, honorable man could genuinely be attracted to her. Another part, the part shaped by years of subtle and not so subtle rejection, was certain there must be some mistake or hidden motive. "I need time," she said finally. "This is all very unexpected." "Of course," Gus agreed immediately. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." He stood, brushing dust from his pants. "May I call on you again? Perhaps take you for a ride on Sunday after church?" Daisy found herself nodding. "I'd like that." As autumn deepened, so did Daisy's attachment to Silver Creek and its inhabitants. Her students were making good progress, and she had begun to form friendships with several of the mothers who occasionally brought treats for the class, or stayed to help with special projects. Frank Thompson and his ilk still made the occasional rude comment when she passed the saloon, but increasingly, other townspeople would call them out for their behavior. Mrs. Perkins told her that Mayor Jenkins had even threatened to revoke the saloon's license if the harassment continued. And then there was August. True to his word, he called on her regularly, riding into town at least twice a week to bring her books or wildflowers or simply to sit and talk. On Sundays, they would ride together after church, exploring the countryside around Silver Creek. Sometimes they joined Daniel and Emily for dinner afterward. Other times, they would take a simple picnic and find a quiet spot by the creek. Daisy found herself looking forward to these visits with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. August was unlike any man she had ever known, thoughtful, direct, and seemingly genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings. He asked about her lessons, listened attentively to her ideas, and shared his own perspectives on everything from ranching to politics to literature. And he never, not once, made her feel self-conscious about her appearance. On the contrary, he frequently complimented her on her hair, her eyes, the color of a dress that brought out the blue in her eyes. When they rode together, he would occasionally place his hand over hers or touch her arm to point out a hawk soaring overhead, and each casual touch sent warmth spreading through her. By the time the first snow fell in late October, Daisy had to admit to herself that she was falling in love with August Yates. The realization came one evening as she sat by her fire, reading a book of poetry he had lent her. She found herself reading the same romantic verse over and over, thinking not of the poet's intended but of August, his gray eyes, his rare but transformative smile, the way he listened so intently when she spoke. "Oh dear," she murmured to herself. This wasn't part of the plan. Her original intention had been to establish herself as Silver Creek's teacher, to build a life independent of any man's approval or support. Love, especially with a man like August, who could have his pick of women, had seemed an unlikely possibility. And yet, here she was, her heart racing at the mere thought of him, counting the hours until his next visit. The first heavy snowfall came in mid-November, blanketing the town and surrounding countryside in white. School was canceled for 2 days while the paths were cleared, and Daisy spent the unexpected free time catching up on grading and planning the Christmas pageant her students had been clamoring for. On the third day, as she was preparing to ring the school bell, a commotion outside drew her attention. Looking through the window, she saw August dismounting from his horse, which was steaming with exertion. She hurried to the door. "August, what's wrong?" His face was grim. "Emily's gone into labor early. The baby's coming, but there are complications. Dr. Carson is out at the Miller farm delivering another baby. Daniel sent me to see if you would come. Emily's asking for you." Daisy's heart raced with concern for her friend. "Of course I'll come. Let me just leave a note for the children." She quickly wrote a message explaining the school's closure for the day and pinned it to the door. Then she rushed to her quarters to grab her warmest cloak and a few personal items. When she returned, August had already saddled the school's mare for her. "It's a hard ride in this snow," he warned. "Can you manage it?" "For Emily, yes," Daisy replied, allowing him to help her mount. The journey to the Double Y was arduous, with snow drifts making the trail treacherous in places. August led the way, occasionally looking back to ensure Daisy was managing. Despite the cold and the difficult conditions, Daisy felt a surge of pride that he had come to her for help, that he trusted her enough to bring her into this intimate family crisis. When they finally reached the ranch, Daniel met them at the door, his face haggard with worry. "Thank God you're here," he said, helping Daisy remove her snow-covered cloak. "She's been asking for you." Daisy followed him upstairs to the master bedroom, where Emily lay in the large bed, her face pale and beaded with sweat. An older woman whom Daisy recognized as Mrs. Cooper, the livery owner's wife, was bathing Emily's forehead with a cool cloth. "Daisy," Emily gasped, reaching out a hand. "You came." "Of course I came," Daisy replied, moving to take her friend's hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm being torn in two," Emily admitted with a weak attempt at humor. "The baby's coming too soon, and Mrs. Cooper says it's positioned wrong." Mrs. Cooper nodded grimly. "Breech birth." I've delivered many babies, but this is beyond my experience. We need the doctor." "Dr. Carson is at the Miller farm," August said from the doorway. "I sent one of the hands to fetch him, but with the snow—" He didn't need to finish the thought. In these conditions, it could be hours before the doctor arrived, hours that Emily and her baby might not have. Daisy squeezed Emily's hand. "My mother was a midwife," she said. "I assisted her many times. I'm not a doctor, but I know something about difficult births." Hope flickered in Daniel's eyes. "Can you help her?" Daisy took a deep breath. "I can try." For the next several hours, Daisy worked alongside Mrs. Cooper to help Emily through her labor. They positioned her to ease the baby's passage. Used techniques Daisy remembered from her mother's practice to help turn the infant, and encouraged Emily through each contraction. August and Daniel took turns pacing outside the door, coming in occasionally to offer support and comfort to Emily. The children had been sent to stay with one of the ranch hands and his wife in the bunkhouse, sparing them the tension and fear that filled the main house. As evening approached, Emily's strength was flagging. "I can't," she whispered after a particularly painful contraction. "I can't do this anymore." "Yes, you can," Daisy insisted, wiping Emily's brow. "You're the strongest woman I know, Emily Yates. This baby needs you to be strong for just a little longer." With renewed determination, Emily pushed through the next contraction, and finally, there was progress. The baby began to emerge, and with one last heroic effort, Emily delivered her child, a tiny but perfect baby girl with a shock of dark hair. For a terrifying moment, the baby didn't cry. Daisy quickly cleared the infant's airways and rubbed her back vigorously until a thin wail filled the room. "She's breathing," Daisy announced, tears of relief streaming down her face. "She's small, but she's breathing." Mrs. Cooper efficiently cut and tied the umbilical cord, then wrapped the baby in a soft blanket before placing her in Emily's arms. "She's beautiful," Emily whispered, gazing down at her daughter. "Daniel, August, come see her." The men entered, their faces transforming with wonder at the sight of the tiny new life. Daniel knelt beside the bed, gently touching his daughter's cheek with a trembling finger. "What will you call her?" August asked, his voice rough with emotion. Emily looked up at Daisy, then back at her baby. "Daisy," she said softly. "Daisy Rose Yates." Daisy's hand flew to her mouth. "Emily, no, you don't have to. We want to," Daniel insisted. "You saved them both. It's the least we can do." Overwhelmed, Daisy excused herself and stepped out onto the upstairs landing, where she leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. The events of the day caught up with her, and she found herself trembling with delayed fear and relief. A warm hand on her shoulder made her look up. August stood before her, his eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Thank you," he said simply. "For Emily, for the baby, for everything." And then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her against his chest as she finally gave in to the tears she'd been holding back. His hand stroked her hair as he murmured soft words of comfort and gratitude. When her tears subsided, Daisy became acutely aware of their position, of his strong arms around her, of her face pressed against his shirt, of the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. She should step back, maintain propriety, but she couldn't bring herself to move. "Daisy," August said softly, his voice rumbling in his chest. "Look at me." She tilted her head back to meet his gaze, and what she saw there took her breath away. Admiration, yes, but also naked longing and something deeper, something that made her heart race. "I know this isn't the right time or place," he said, his voice low. "But watching you today, your courage, your competence, your compassion, I've never been more certain of anything in my life." "Certain of what?" Daisy whispered. "That I love you," August replied simply. That I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Daisy stared at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or hesitation. She found none, only open, honest emotion that mirrored what she felt in her own heart. "August," she began, then stopped, uncertain how to express the tumult of feelings inside her. "You don't have to answer now," he assured her quickly. "I know it's sudden, and with everything that's happened today," Daisy silenced him by placing her fingers gently against his lips. "It's not sudden," she said softly. "Not to me. I've been falling in love with you since the day you told me I was heavy enough to anchor your soul." August's eyes widened, and then he was smiling, that rare, transformative smile that made her heart skip. He captured her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Does that mean—" "It means yes," Daisy confirmed. "Yes, I love you too. Yes, I want to build a life with you." The joy that blazed across his face was blinding. For a moment, he simply held her gaze as if memorizing her features. Then, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, respectful of their surroundings and the solemnity of the day's events. But even in its gentleness, it held a promise of passion, of a future filled with love and understanding. When they separated, August rested his forehead against hers. "I should go check on Daniel and Emily," he murmured. "And you should rest. It's been a long day." Daisy nodded, reluctantly stepping back from his embrace. "Will you stay in town for the Christmas pageant next week?" "The children have been working so hard on it." "I wouldn't miss it," August promised. "In fact, I thought I might speak to Reverend Miller about another ceremony that might take place in the church soon after." Daisy felt her cheeks warm. "Isn't that a bit presumptuous, Mr. Yates?" "You haven't formally asked me anything yet." August's eyes danced with humor. "Consider it advance planning, Miss Sutherland. I like to be prepared." With one more quick kiss, he headed back to check on his brother's family, leaving Daisy with a heart full of hope and happiness. The days leading up to Christmas were a whirlwind of activity. The school pageant was a resounding success, with even the most reluctant students performing their parts with enthusiasm. Daisy received numerous compliments from parents, and Mayor Jenkins announced that the town council had voted to increase her salary in recognition of her excellent work. August spent more time in town than at the ranch, helping with preparations for the holiday and spending every available moment with Daisy. They walked together in the evenings, dined with Mrs. Perkins, and attended community gatherings where they were increasingly treated as a couple. On Christmas Eve, after the church service, August invited Daisy for a sleigh ride. He had decorated his sleigh with evergreen boughs and bells and tucked warm blankets around her as they set off into the starlit night. "Where are we going?" Daisy asked as they left the town behind. "You'll see," August replied mysteriously. He guided the horses to a hill overlooking Silver Creek, where the lights of the town twinkled like earthbound stars. The night was clear and cold, the snow sparkling in the moonlight. August helped Daisy from the sleigh and led her to a spot where a large boulder provided some shelter from the light breeze. From his pocket, he produced a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a simple string. "Merry Christmas," he said, offering it to her. Daisy unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small wooden box, similar to the one that had held the alphabet blocks he had given her months ago. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect pearl. "It was my mother's," August explained. "My father gave it to her when he asked her to marry him." Daisy looked up at him, her heart in her throat. August took her hands in his. "Daisy Sutherland, when you arrived in Silver Creek, I had no idea how completely you would change my life. You've brought joy, intelligence, and beauty into my world. You've shown me what it means to be truly strong not just in body, but in spirit." He dropped to one knee in the snow, still holding her hands. "I love you. I want to spend my life with you, to build a family with you, to grow old with you. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Daisy's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, August Yates, I will marry you." August slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to pull her into his arms. This kiss was different from their first, deeper, more passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, August rested his forehead against hers. "You know what this means, don't you?" "What?" Daisy asked, still dazed from his kiss. "You'll have to get used to being called Mrs. Yates instead of Miss Sutherland," he said with a teasing smile. "I think I can manage that," Daisy replied, returning his smile, "though I'll still be Miss Sutherland in the classroom." "And what about at the ranch?" August asked more seriously. "I know how much you love teaching. I wouldn't ask you to give it up." Daisy considered this. "Perhaps we could work something out with the school board. I could continue teaching until we start a family and then see how things go." "Whatever makes you happy," August said sincerely. "That's what matters to me." They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in the Silver Creek Church, with the entire town in attendance. Emily, recovered from her difficult delivery, stood as Daisy's matron of honor, with little Daisy Rose sleeping peacefully in Daniel's arms throughout the ceremony. Daisy wore a gown of ivory satin that Mrs. Perkins and several other women from town had helped her make, with lace at the collar and cuffs that had been sent by her sister in Boston, a peace offering after months of strained correspondence. August wore a new suit ordered from Denver, though he had adamantly refused to give up his boots for the occasion. When Reverend Miller pronounced them husband and wife, August's kiss was both tender and possessive, drawing cheers and a few good-natured whistles from the congregation. The celebration afterward was held at the town hall, with tables groaning under the weight of food contributed by nearly every family in Silver Creek. There was dancing and laughter, speeches and toasts, and through it all, August kept Daisy close, as if afraid she might disappear if he let her go. As evening approached, they slipped away to begin the journey to the Double Y, which would now be Daisy's home as well. August had prepared the old foreman's cabin for them, a smaller house, a short distance from the main ranch house, providing privacy while keeping them close to family. "Welcome home, Mrs. Yates," August said as he carried her over the threshold, a tradition he had insisted on observing despite Daisy's laughing protests about her weight. "It's perfect," Daisy said, looking around at the cozy interior. August had clearly put considerable effort into preparing it for her. There were bookshelves filled with volumes from his collection, a writing desk by the window, comfortable furniture arranged around a stone fireplace, and fresh evergreen boughs adding their fragrance to the air. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their new home, Daisy traced the contours of her husband's face with gentle fingers. "Happy?" August asked, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Daisy replied truthfully. "When I left Boston, I was just hoping to find a place where I could be accepted for who I am. I never dreamed I would find someone who would love me for it." August gathered her closer, his arms strong and secure around her. "When I said you were heavy enough to anchor my soul, I meant it," he murmured against her hair. "Before you, I was adrift in many ways. Now I know exactly where I belong." "And where is that?" Daisy asked, though she already knew the answer. "Wherever you are," August replied simply. "That's home." Spring arrived on the Montana plains, turning the world green almost overnight. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows around the Double Y, and new calves wobbled alongside their mothers in the pastures. Daisy had continued teaching through the winter, riding to and from town each day when weather permitted, staying with Mrs. Perkins when it didn't. As the school year drew to a close, Daisy found herself facing a decision. She loved teaching, but the daily journey between the ranch and town was becoming more difficult as her own body changed with the new life growing inside her. When she shared the news with August, his joy had been boundless. He had lifted her off her feet and swung her around, then set her down abruptly, apologizing for his exuberance. "Is it too soon to start thinking of names?" he asked that night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "Perhaps a little," Daisy laughed. "We have months yet. If it's a girl, I thought maybe Catherine after your mother," August suggested. "And if it's a boy, perhaps William after my father." "Both fine names," Daisy agreed, touched by his thoughtfulness, "though we have plenty of time to decide." As her pregnancy progressed, Daisy made the difficult decision to resign from her teaching position, at least temporarily. The school board expressed their regret, but understood her reasons, and they hired a young woman from Helena to take her place. "It's not forever," August assured her, seeing her wistfulness as they attended the end-of-year celebration at the school. "You can always go back when you're ready." "I know," Daisy said, "and I'm excited about the baby, it's just, I'll miss it." "Which is exactly why you're such a good teacher," August pointed out, "and why you'll be an exceptional mother." The summer passed in a blur of activity. August expanded the cabin, adding a nursery and a larger kitchen. Daisy planted a garden, started a small orchard, and helped Emily with little Daisy Rose, who was thriving despite her early arrival. By autumn, Daisy's figure had blossomed with her pregnancy, and she found herself marveling at August's continued admiration. Where she saw awkwardness and ungainliness, he saw beauty and the miracle of new life. "You've never been more beautiful," he told her one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky. His hand rested on the swell of her belly, where their child kicked vigorously. "You're biased," Daisy replied with a smile. "Accurate," August corrected. "And grateful every day that Frank Thompson was a loud-mouthed fool." Daisy laughed, remembering that first day in Silver Creek. "I was so hurt by his comment, if you hadn't been there." "If I hadn't been there, someone else would have stood up for you," August said confidently. "Silver Creek has its share of fools, but there are more good people than bad." He was right, Daisy reflected. Over the past year, she had been embraced by the community in ways she had never experienced in Boston. Her size, which had been a constant source of judgment in the East, was rarely mentioned here, where practical concerns like whether she could teach effectively or manage a household were far more important than whether she conformed to arbitrary standards of beauty. Their son was born on a clear October day, with Dr. Carson attending and Emily assisting. William August Yates entered the world with a lusty cry and a shock of dark hair like his father's. "He's perfect," August whispered, cradling his son with a mixture of awe and terror. "Absolutely perfect." "He is," Daisy agreed, exhausted but elated. "And he has your eyes." As William grew, so did the double Y. August and Daniel expanded their operations, buying adjacent land when it became available and increasing their herd. The ranch prospered, allowing them to hire more hands and build better facilities. By the time William was 2, Daisy was ready to return to teaching, though in a different capacity. She began holding classes at the ranch for the children of the hands, as well as her own son and his cousins. What started as an informal arrangement soon became a small school, with families from neighboring ranches sending their children to learn from the respected Mrs. Yates. On William's 5th birthday, as family and friends gathered to celebrate, Daisy shared the news that another Yates would be joining the family in the spring. August's joy was as boundless as it had been the first time, though this time he refrained from swinging her around. Their daughter, Catherine Emily Yates, was born in April 1886, a delicate contrast to her sturdy brother. Where William had August's coloring and build, Catherine was fair like her mother, with auburn curls and eyes that shifted between green and blue. Life settled into a rhythm of seasons: spring calving, summer haying, fall roundup, winter planning. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Daisy's small school gained a reputation for excellence that spread throughout the county. There were challenges, of course. Harsh winters when food ran low and they worried about the herd. A fire that destroyed one of the barns and nearly spread to the main house. A year of drought that tested their resources and resolve. But through it all, August and Daisy faced each difficulty together, their partnership strengthening with each obstacle overcome. On their 10th wedding anniversary, August surprised Daisy with a trip to Yellowstone, leaving the children with Daniel and Emily for a week. They rode through geysers and hot springs, marveled at the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, and spent evenings by campfires under stars that seemed close enough to touch. Any regrets? August asked one night as they lay wrapped in blankets, the fire burning low beside them. Daisy considered the question seriously. "Only that I didn't come west sooner," she said finally. "Think of all the time we could have had together." August pulled her closer. "We have now," he reminded her, "and all the years ahead. Do you ever regret marrying me?" Daisy asked, a remnant of old insecurity surfacing unexpectedly. A woman too heavy for Boston society. August propped himself up on one elbow to look down at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and tenderness. "Daisy Yates, in 10 years of marriage, I have never once, not for a single moment, regretted making you my wife. You are the heart of our home, the center of our family, and still always the anchor of my soul." He kissed her then, a kiss that held a decade of shared joy and sorrow, of passion and companionship, of a love that had only deepened with time. As they rode back to the Double Y at the end of their trip, Daisy looked out over the landscape that had become home. The mountains in the distance, the rolling hills covered in grass and wildflowers, the clear blue sky stretching endlessly above them. And beside her, the man who had seen beyond her appearance to the person within, who had loved her not despite her size but embracing all of who she was. "Race you to that ridge," August challenged suddenly, his eyes alight with mischief. Daisy laughed, urging her horse forward. "You're on." They thundered across the plains together, heading toward home.